Serviced accommodation is not for me. I've heard about it, booking.com, Airbnb, I'm not interested. Here's 3 massive reasons why you might want to think about service accommodation versus a buy-to-let. Number 1, you get more money, you get more cash, you make more profit. Using the same property, instead of making, say, £500, comfortably you can make £1,000, possibly £2,000. That's reason number 1. Reason number 2, you pay a lot less tax. Why? Buy-to-lets in the UK are subject to all sorts of draconian tax measures from the government, like, for instance, Section 24, which means you can't recover 100% of your mortgage interest costs. Well, as soon as you take that same property with the same mortgage, potentially, and you turn it into service accommodation, Section 24 just doesn't apply. So you don't get the tax penalties, but you qualify for tax benefits, like capital allowances. This is an HMRC tax scheme where you can earn up to £1 million a year tax-free, but you can't get that. You don't qualify if it's a buy-to-let. You only qualify if you're a business. So if you're service accommodation, that counts as a business, according to HMRC. Therefore, you can get this tax break. But number 3, I find in my experience, is quite often the biggest one. Think about the last time that a tenant didn't pay. A tenant damaged your property. You needed, unfortunately, to ask a tenant to leave and they didn't want to go. I've been relatively lucky over the years, but I've still had 2 evictions that have cost me upwards of £50,000. Now that's on a property that's making £500 a month, which is £6,000 a year. So one bad tenant, in a few cases, cost me approximately 9 years profit. Can't happen with service accommodation because you don't have tenants. You've got guests. And they don't have tenants' rights. So if they don't pay, they don't stay. Don't just take your house and stick it on Airbnb. Why? Because Airbnb, specifically in the UK, only accounts for about 14% of the marketplace. Now let's keep it easier, let's call it 1/6. I know people that have taken a property and put it on Airbnb, and then they try and tell me that service accommodation doesn't work. Why wouldn't you also put it on booking.com? Booking.com on its own, it's got 3 times more volume going through it than Airbnb. If you've got a piece of software that I could tell you about that costs you £6 a month per property, why wouldn't you put it on all of them? Why wouldn't you? If it was free, and it costs nothing in terms of effort for you, and it all happened automatically, why wouldn't you put it onto some weird Italian booking engine that you've never heard of? Because it doesn't cost you anything. And what if you get a party of 4 Italians staying for the next 6 months and giving you a cheque for £30,000? Why wouldn't you do that? So it's not a binary choice. It's not Airbnb or something else. It's Airbnb and everything else, in my view. So why would I take my lovely buy-to-let that gives me a reliable income and risk putting it on Airbnb? Well, 3 quick reasons. You'll get more money, you'll pay less tax, in fact you'll get tax breaks, you get tax back, if you know what you're doing, and you won't have any tenant hassles. I say to people that are existing buy-to-let owners, existing investment property owners, it's not a forever choice. I want you to just think about taking just one of your properties, because this is what I did, and give it 4 months. Now, if you've got 5, 10 properties, 4 months lack of buy-to-let rent isn't going to wipe you out, is it? And I just said to myself, well, if it doesn't work for whatever reason as service accommodation, I can always put it back to a buy-to-let. And it should work if you read my book, if you do my courses, if you learn how to do it properly. But put all that to one side. The risk is probably 4 months rent. Because if it's not working for you, despite education support training, after 4 months, there's a possibility that it wouldn't. But you could just put it back as a buy-to-let. And by the way, I have trained thousands and thousands of people. I've had myself hundreds and hundreds of service accommodation units in my business. It's never happened to me. Serviced accommodation is not for me. I've heard about it, booking.com, Airbnb, I'm not interested. What you're essentially saying, if you say that, is that you don't want the extra cash flow, because instead of a few £100s a month, you get a few £1,000s a month profit. You want to pay the extra taxes, which, some people do, I get it. And then number 3, you've got all the tenant hassles that you wouldn't have. Let's say that we're sat in April and you get a booking for October. You would take the money 6 months early. Well, why wouldn't you want 6 months positive cash flow? So when people say to me, service accommodation is not for me, it doesn't fit my values or lifestyle, I'm really trying to understand what they mean. They might say, well, you know, I've got enough money, why would I want more money? If you've got a service accommodation unit versus a normal buy-to-let, you're bringing people to the area. They're going to spend money in the local economy. So on one hand, you're saying, well, I think I've got enough. Well, do you think every single person in your town, village or city has got enough too? Because if their livelihood is in any way, shape or form connected with extra people to the area, you're letting them down. The second thing is tax. You don't have to pay as much tax, you can pay less tax. In fact, you can get tax rebates. Now, you might be coming from an ethical point of view that says, some people would even say a moral point of view, that I feel obligated to pay more tax. If you've got surplus money and you want to give it to medical research, or you want to go and dig some wells and provide some much needed water in Africa or something like that, we'll do it as well. So it's not a choice between doing your duty as a citizen or being Scrooge. You can save some of that tax, which I think they're going to waste anyway, and you can then use it for good causes. So maybe you could just give me some comments and so I could understand it a bit, because when I hear people saying that service accommodation is not for me, I'm genuinely confused. It's like, well, you don't want the extra money, you don't want to save tax, and you want the extra aggravation of tenants. Service accommodation, Paul, love it, but isn't it like massively time consuming? And I'm already working full time, and I don't know, I've got kids, I've got a dog, I help out at the church. So, you know, Paul, I just really don't have any time. My first answer to that is, in a general sense, nothing to do with service accommodation. If you have literally no time, I think you probably need to change that before you burn yourself out. If you then ask the question, how many hours a week would it take me to run my service accommodation business? I think that's a critical thing, because I put business on the end, didn't I? So if what you do is have 1 or 2 properties, you're doing the cleaning yourself, you're doing the maintenance yourself, you're ironing the sheets yourself, you're handling the bookings yourself, you're taking the money yourself, it will turn into a time-consuming job. But if you learn the systems that I use to turn it into a business is what? A business is a profitable commercial enterprise that works without you. But be realistic, Paul, I'm going to have to do something. Yes, you're probably going to have to spend 1 hour a week. How on earth can I get it down to 1 hour a week, Paul? Easy. Follow the systems. So use the right software that automatically takes bookings, automatically takes payments. It's not expensive. It's like, you know, £6 to £10 per property per month. Second, employ good local housekeepers that do the cleaning for you, because you can afford it. So don't cut your prices artificially so that you end up with an extra job and you work for nothing, essentially. Make sure that the prices you're charging allow you to pay for good professionals to do maintenance, housekeeping, ironing, and all the other things that will need to be done. Next, employ a virtual assistant. What's that? Well, in our businesses, in total, we're employing 13 virtual assistants. Ours tend to come from the Philippines, and we employ them, it depends on their skill level, between $400 and about $1,000 a month. That's full time. So let's just say you start off and you've got 2 or 3 properties and you need 10 hours a week for customer relations, or, you know, whatever you need it for, bookkeeping, this sorts of things. If you say that it's $100 a week for that kind of skill in the Philippines, and you only need a quarter of that, well, it's $25 a week. Why would you work for $25 a week? Whenever anybody asks me, are there any guarantees in life? There's lots of guarantees. You go and buy a car from Mercedes or Ford or whoever, and they give you, say, a 7-year guarantee. Does that mean that the car won't break down? No. It means that the car will get fixed or repaired if they believe it's their fault and it breaks down. So it's never a full guarantee that you're going to get a perfect service, because it can't be. I'm an engineer, and we know for a fact that the only perfectly safe way to do anything is not do it. Think about property in a general sense. What's guaranteed, I could say, is that over time, property prices will go up. So whether you do service accommodation or not, over time, if you keep it for long enough, property prices will go up. So owning property is a good idea whether you do service accommodation or not. And you might say to me, well, can you guarantee that? Well, no, because I don't know what's going to happen next year. But I do know that since 1952, when records began, the price of property in the UK has doubled on average every 7 to 10 years. And now if we look at, can I get guaranteed bookings? No. What does that even mean? What I can guarantee you is if you want the extra cash flow and you don't do service accommodation, you won't get it. So I can give you a guarantee as to what won't happen if you don't do it. What you're asking me is a guarantee what will happen if you do it. And I would say this, I would say give it 4 months. And as long as you can afford to cash flow that property, and it's not going to mean that your house gets repossessed or the kids don't get fed or they come and take your car away because you haven't made the payments, I would say your success is relatively guaranteed. But if you're in a desperate place, and if you need this service accommodation to start making money tomorrow morning, don't do it. If you're playing the national lottery, smoking, drinking, having coffee at Costa Coffee, Starbucks or similar, if you stop doing all those things and save money and use that to invest in property or service accommodation, I can guarantee you that you'll have a wealthier and longer life.